So, Aron, what contracts should we as small business owners have in place to protect us in our relationships for vendors and factories?
So when you're dealing with people upstream, those vendors and factories that you're dealing with, you probably are going to need to have some sort of project agreement or service contracts in place so that it's clear what you're getting from them, how you're getting it from them. And you would also probably want to have some sort of intellectual property protections in there, for example, because I know some of the people listening, we're talking about producing things, manufacturing things here. So if you're manufacturing something and I've got a patent on this widget, and this widget does whatever, lets people fly, you got a jetpack. So you're now producing jetpacks. Well, you probably have a patent on that. And if you don't have a patent, you should go get one. But let's say you have a patent on it. You should also, in your agreements with the vendors or factories that you're having produce the jetpacks, have them sign off on certain intellectual property protections so that they can't do things. Or and sometimes people can be creative with that. So that's why I think it's important to hire an attorney, because you can think of maybe three different things, three different ways to protect it. But an attorney who's dealt with that kind of thing regularly, or that deals with contracts regularly, might think of 6 or 7 different things, and their grid for the different ways that you're going to need protection is just going to be larger, just because that's their focus. That's what they've been trained to do. So for example, one thing I would want in there is some sort of provision that says, okay, you're not going to produce this, but also you're not going to take a sample and send it to other people. So, and in that way, cause somebody else to be able to replicate it or reverse engineer it. And, I don't know if you ever remember the movie Paycheck with Ben Affleck. It's an old movie. I think it was called Paycheck. But he would literally get contracted. It's a futuristic sci-fi movie to go reverse engineer different kinds of widgets for companies. And then they would wipe his memory. And yeah.
Aron, oh my gosh, I own a packaging company, and they would do that all the time. I would find out that people were they would even be posting our packaging designs on their manufacturers' Instagram, promoting that they had done something. And so even that confidentiality of saying, don't tell people that you are our contract manufacturer. Don't tell people that you are the exclusive manufacturer of, Aron and Emily's jetpacks, because even knowing that, if they want to copy your product, they'll just go right to that factory. And like Trader Joe's and a bunch of other companies that are large, like Target, they specifically, they have contracts like that with you if you are the factory. And so it makes sense that if you are a brand owner, you're using a contract manufacturer, you should have that same type of thing in place. So what did you call that? You called that a service agreement. And so that would be different than a purchase order.
Yeah. So some sort of service agreement or master service agreement, because, for example, it's not uncommon for, if you're going to have an ongoing relationship with a company, to put some sort of base contract in place. So you might refer to that as a master service agreement, and that would have certain things that say, for the duration of this relationship, here's the rules of the game. And it would even refer to purchase orders. So you would have, under that master service agreement, then purchase orders that you can make, with different PO numbers or whatever you want, however you decide to sort that information. But you would have purchase orders and other potential ancillary contracts, work orders, and such under that, and referred to under the master service agreement. And the master service agreement would be the thing that has the intellectual property protections, and it would also potentially have payment terms, as well as like a non-circumvention clause. So that ties back into what we talked about earlier. So let's say you have an employee who deals with all of your vendors and all the factories. And so this employee, worst case scenario, you have no contracts in place, and this employee starts to get a big head and thinks, I can do this myself. And so they go out, and now they have relationships with all these factories. You could have some sort of non-circumvention agreement in place where these factories or vendors are providing this service to you, and they cannot provide the same service for the same widgets or that sort of thing to one of your employees who strikes out on their own. So that way they don't end up saying, hey, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, we'll work with just you if you jump out on your own.
Man, Aron, I just love that you're saying this. I'm going to turn this into an article. I'm going to send it to all of my clients who are in the product business, because I don't think most of them have product service contracts. And one thing I want to add to everyone who's listening, if you run a small business, there is this weird balance between when you're a startup and when you're actually successful. And so when you're just starting out, you don't have enough clout to really reinforce sometimes or convince a factory to, agree to outrageous requests. So your requests really need to be within scope of how much money you're planning to spend with them. Because if you give them a wild 200-page contract because you have a crazy attorney who's really all about like good contracts and he's not very practical, you can actually hurt the relationship with your factory and scare them away.
True.
Unless you come with a big check and you tell them like, I'm going to do a lot of business with you and you're Apple. So when you're a small person, you need to have a reasonable contract. And if you really are already financially funded, then yes, you can have a more strategic one. But having said that about a contract that reflects the size of your company, if you're asking for like the minimum order quantity, no one really wants to sign your crazy agreement. It better be simple. You better ask your attorney to make one that reflects the size of your intended purchase order. But the other piece about it is that everything boils down to relationships, everything. Because even if you have a good contract in place and they sign it and then they violate it, you have to spend stupid money to go and chase that factory down and get, to fix it, right? This is why I respect Aron so much, because he is not the kind of person who's like litigious happy. He's giving advice that's going to protect you from ever having to go to court. That's your best situation. You want these contracts to be kind of like an outline of saying, hey, this is what I'm expecting. Do you agree to this? And so you should be talking conversationally through a contract. Get your attorney to make the contract. Make sure you understand it before you send it to your contract manufacturer or your factory. And then most contract manufacturers don't want to even read your contract, unless you're going to give them an order. They see a purchase order there. So write a quick summary of like what it means. Talk it through with them. Go line by line. Show them what it means and what you're trying to do, and say it in a friendly. You should be grateful that they're manufacturing your stuff, and say it in a way that is partnership building. And if you come across like a partner and you're creating this contract to increase the friendship level between that factory and you so that you guys can order tons of products in the future, that's the kind of language that you want to put in place. Just imagine if you're getting married to someone and you did a prenup and you give it to that person that you're so in love with and you're going to get married to and you want them to build a life with you, and you say it like, I think you're going to steal from me. That breaks down the relationship, the loving relationship. And instead, the way that you would want to approach it is, I expect to work with you forever. And I just want to be sure that we've talked through all the important elements, because we're going to make a lot of money together, or because we're going to build an amazing family together. So let's talk about the end at the very beginning, so we can just be not worried about anything and always feel secure in this relationship. So I think that element is an important piece. Do you have anything to add?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I want to touch on the phrase you said there near the end of feeling secure in the relationship. I think that's a proactive, positive way to say it, because comparing it to a marriage analogy, like you said, good boundaries are there to make sure both people feel safe being fully committed within the relationship. So in the same way, good boundaries in the form of a contract are designed to make both parties feel safe performing what they need to perform within the bounds of the relationship.
Yes. So for everyone watching, again, we're talking about vendors and factories, contracts that you should have in place if you own a small business. So what Aron just said is that you should have a services contract or a master service agreement. So that would be a contract that kind of describes, hey, factory, this is what I want a relationship to look like. It could have the terms of payment, remedies, if anything goes wrong, overages. You can talk about overages and underages, which means you might order 10,000 pieces, and whether or not you're willing to pay for product over, like you need to specify that. Non-circumvent, so don't poach my employees. Non-compete or confidentiality agreements, so that they're not going to steal the clients that you're selling to. If you're a brand owner and you're selling to Target, you're using a contract manufacturer, you're the middle guy and you don't want to be removed from that relationship. So that's another element of non-circumvent. intellectual property, NDA, confidentiality has to do with sending samples to other people or allowing someone else to have access to your IP. So these are contract elements that you need to have an attorney look at. And in addition to this, so whenever you're working with a factory, you have your services contract, and then you have to have a purchase order, which is the order that is specific to, hey, I'm ordering 10,000 units. So you have the contract, master service agreement, and then you have a purchase order. And the purchase order, you don't need to have an attorney look at. It just states your accountant should look at that. That's the number of units you're ordering.
Make sure it's accurate.
Make sure it's accurate. The terms could possibly be reviewed by an attorney, but that'd be a quick commentary. So Aron, do you want to give advice to anyone watching about, when do you hire an attorney to do this? What's the general scope of time or investment, or, what's your advice there?
So because of the complexity for this kind of contract, if you're getting an actual master service agreement or service, some sort of project agreement in place that's going to define the scope of the ongoing relationship, I would never bootstrap that agreement and get an attorney as soon as possible. Now, maybe, like you said, if you're a startup and you're just placing the minimum order the first time, then you may not have a choice. You may have to bootstrap it or see what agreements they have in place and take their agreement and then just try to negotiate it. And so that may be a way to kind of short circuit it a bit. But I think as soon as you're able to afford it, and generally it's going to be a point in time where it hurts a little bit still to hire an attorney. I mean, most people don't go, oh, I'm going to enjoy hiring an attorney. One thing maybe as a mentality that you may want to think about for attorneys, I think this is true for attorneys, CPAs, financial planners for small businesses, is kind of the 1% rule. As you grow, try to budget at least 1% of your revenue each year, at least, for professional advice, just going forward, strategic advice going forward. So that way, and that's not just like your tax return, that's required, but what kind of proactive things can you be doing as you're growing to protect yourself? And as you get larger, that number is going to go up. But if you have it in your head as a baseline of 1%, you're going to feel a lot more comfortable when you're $1 million company spending $10,000 on an attorney, because that's what's needed to help you grow in the most safe way.
Aron, I think that's so wise. And this is, again, why I enjoy talking to you, because this is very practical advice. So I've talked to some attorneys who just say, you should pay me $25,000 now. And I hadn't even started that idea. And you're like, I don't think this is really, I think this might be overkill. I don't even know if this is going to work. And then there's other times where I've met massive companies that don't want to have an attorney, and they have, 20 franchises, and they're doing millions of dollars of business, and they don't feel that they would need it. And then something happens and they get sued, and they don't even have a backup plan. So yeah. I love what you're describing is there's a timeline with your business when you're maybe ideating, especially if you're a small guy, like he just mentioned, you can talk to your factory. They probably have a service agreement in place. But the more successful you are, the more you need to have these things. And you don't want to wait until you're a wild success to do it. So you are responsible, small business owner, to learn and think about that proactively. You want to protect yourself, because it's just too expensive on the other end to lose a great idea or a great business from lack of having good